and cargo flows, although I think it's already come out now that normal flights will still pursue progress from Algeria to UAE and vice versa. Algerian state radio said the North African country had initiated the formal process to terminate the agreement, which was ratified by the presidential decree in December 2014. So obviously now they're tarnishing deals that they have with the UAE. They're publicly condemning them online, and Algeria is also turning away from the West and away from where the Morocco looks like Israel and the United States for military assets, and they've actually turned to Russia. So this is Middle East Online. I really liked how this article was written, but you can find this on mainstream media news sources, and it reads, Washington threatens sanctions as Algeria acquires Russian jets. It reads here, Robert Palladino, the head of Middle East Affairs at the U.S. State Department, raised the possibility during testimony before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee last week, signaling growing concern in Washington over Algeria's deepening defense ties with Moscow. The U.S. may impose sanctions on Algeria because of its purchase, Palladino said, adding that Washington had reviewed media reports about the deal and found them, quote, concerning. He stressed that Washington continues to engage closely with the Algerian government on areas of mutual interest, but acknowledged the significant disagreements with the arms deal representing a key point of contention. Quote, we are working closely with the Algerian government on issues where we find common ground, end quote. Palladino also said, quote, at the same time, we have serious differences on many other topics, and the arms deal is an example of what the United States considers problematic, end quote, he told lawmakers. This is all tied back to the CATSAW. This stands for, it says here, but it's this pact that we signed with them in 2017, and it's designed to restrict funding for Russia's defense. So, in simple terms, this pact was signed to limit Russia's influence and pretty much their military capabilities penetrating North Africa, which historically has always been an issue. We saw that in the Yom Kippur War. We're seeing that now with Iran. We're seeing that with Syria under the Bashar al-Assad regime before Ahmed al-Shara took power. And so the United States is already sick and tired of Russian intervention inside of North Africa and the Middle East. So that's why this pact was created, which obviously Russia violated because they went and acquired these weapons anyways. They got a couple jets. I can't remember how many.
Yeah, because how else are they going to get and how else are they going to get support, bro? Realistically speaking, like the U.S. is not going to give them nothing like better than the fucking Israelis.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the Israelis are getting the best shit that basically like maybe one tier below our Air Force. They basically have the same shit. So it's like, yeah, bro. Like and the only way they're going to defend themselves is they have to get Russian or Chinese stuff. That's why the Iranians got the Chinese shit.
See, the issue here is the United States, because we're forced to help Israel, we cannot have any other country in the region with military capabilities, although it would probably be in our interest to do so. And these countries have no choice. They're in this corner where they have to look to other powers for these military assets, but that forces us to be morally unfair and impose sanctions on them, which at this point, Algeria doesn't really get affected from our sanctions if we were to impose them. That's what I've heard from several sources, but it's worth the thought. And sanctions don't have the same power that they had 10 years ago.
Yeah, there's so many ways around them now, bro. The Iranians have mastered it. Like the Russians figured it out.
They cracked the code. Yeah, a lot of countries have kind of figured out how to navigate outside of U.S. sanctions.
BRICS and shit like that is rising up. Cryptocurrency. Yep. Dude, there's so many ways around sanctions now. Like, they still suck. Don't get it twisted. But they're not the, like, death blow that they used to be before.
Yeah. And so these countries are tired of being bullied with sanctions, and they're pretty much withstanding them to a reasonable degree now where the economies don't turn to turmoil after the United States imposes them. But so that's what's going on with Algeria and the UAE. And there's something that actually happened yesterday simultaneously that's really interesting and ties in with this well. And again, it's kind of sharpening the needle that's aimed in the direction of the UAE from all of these countries, being Saudi Arabia, now Algeria, Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, and other secretly aligned nations that are all opposing the UAE-Israel axis. As you guys know, we mentioned that the other stream as well. So this news article, this was posted, when was it? I think yesterday or whatever. But it says international Arab condemnations of RSF attacks on civilians, aid convoys in Sudan. So if you guys don't know, the RSF, or the Rapid Support Forces, is a militant group funded via the UAE in Sudan that has been responsible for the destabilization of millions of people in Khartoum and other provinces in Sudan, like Kordofan, Al-Fashir, so on and so forth. So they've kind of pulled back and they've weakened, and the Sudanese army has been able to resist them. How? Via Russia military support. Putin has been supporting the Sudanese army and resisting the UAE's proxy. Again, another example of Russian influence infiltrating North
And real
Africa.
quick, for them that are wondering, guys, there's civil war in Sudan. There's the Rapid Support Forces, and then there's the Sudanese Armed Forces. The Sudanese Armed Forces is the government's actual army, and then you have the Rapid Support Forces run by a guy named Hameti, who was basically, they were created to kind of fight against the in Western Sudan, also known as the Janjaweed back in the day. There's basically like the evil guys on horses or whatever, or camels. But long story short, the Rapid Support Forces was a paramilitary group that was created to basically protect Omar al-Bashir, who was the former president of Sudan. And he had both of these guys, who the head of the SAF and the head of RSF, basically working with him, and he used to kind of use it as like a check and balance to avoid being overthrown. This worked for a while until the UN got him for like human rights violations, and once he got taken out for the human rights violations, that's when the power vacuum happened, and then Hemeti and who's the top guy for the SAF again?
The RSF, you mean?
Not the Hemeti is RSF. Burhan, yeah. Then they started fighting, and that's why we have this civil war now. So basically, there's a power vacuum, and it was interesting because Omar Bashir had it right, bro. He was in power for a very long time, and he basically had it where they like he insulated himself, because you guys got to understand, in the Middle East, the biggest fear that every ruler has is being overthrown. Okay, so you have to keep people close to you, and what he did was he kind of had this. He was insulated where he had like the RSF there, kind of as like his backup. So the SAF never had too much power. So,
exactly.
But when he got arrested, he got picked up by the international community for the war crimes and shit like that. That created the power vacuum. But as far as like the dictator script, I guess he maintained power for how long was he in, dude? Like 20, 30 years?
Yeah, a long time. Omar al-Bashir reigned for a very long time in Sudan.
You know, which dictators usually don't last as long.
Yeah,
in the Middle East.
And he was a twisted guy and
fucked up.
He was responsible for so many war crimes, but he held power for a long time, and obviously the country is more stable under him.
Yeah,
but
and it always is with these dictators, bro. With Gaddafi, with Saddam Hussein, with Omar Bashir. Like, unfortunately, the Middle East, like I've said before, these niggas are retarded. Like, the Arabs are hard-headed. You have to rule with an iron fist with these niggas, bro. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, go ahead.
Well, obviously, because of this power vacuum, there's absolute turmoil and havoc taking place in Sudan right now, but it's calmed down. But just recently, February 8th, this article reads, the United Nations and the United States strongly condemned the escalating violence in Sudan, where attacks on civilians and humanitarian operations have intensified amid the ongoing conflict between Rapid Support Forces, these are the people funded by the UAE, and then Sudanese Armed Forces, which is the actual native government and the native military, but they're secretly funded by Russia. At least they were. I'm not sure how heavily at this current point. Now, it's important to note, and this is an important nuance here, the United States and really the entire Middle Eastern world was kind of hesitant in condemnation over this intervention. At least they didn't mention it as explicitly as they are now. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is even taking to mention this and condemn the act. So it shows that the world is finally starting to pay attention, which to me is a whole nother point being put here, that the entire world is actually starting to pay attention to the UAE and their undermining of different regimes. Algeria is shedding the light. I'm going to show you how Saudi Arabia is condemning them. And now the UN and other countries like the United States are actually commenting on it. So it's really getting bad for the UAE. They're getting pressed into a corner, and it's becoming hard for them to breathe. But I'll read the end here because this is the most relevant part. This is what's going to segue me into the next part. Saudi Arabia condemned what it described as criminal assaults by the RSF on a military hospital, a World Food Program aid convoy, and a bus carrying displaced civilians. Guys, I believe it was 24 civilians that were killed. These are displaced people who were war-torn. They have no home, and the RSF just launched an assault on their convoy and the Kuwait military hospital and killed all of these people indiscriminately. It reads, a World Food Program aid convoy and a bus carrying displaced civilians in North and South Kordofan, while Kuwait and Egypt also denounced the attacks on civilians and medical and aid facilities. Now, this is the big part here, and this is what's telling me there's about to be a big switcheroonie in the region, especially with this war that's about to take place between the U.S. and Iran. This was a statement released by Saudi Arabia, their Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Obviously, this is all oversat by Mohammed bin Salman because he's a totalitarian, ruler. This is not like some sort of democracy. And so obviously this is coming from him. It always trickles down. And the crazy part about this is again, Saudi Arabia has not been this vocal about any of these issues in the last 2 years because Sudan has been facing this crisis since April of 2023. So this reads: the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia expresses the kingdom's strong condemnation and denunciation of the criminal attacks carried out by the Rapid Support Forces against Al Kuwait Military Hospital. I'll skip to the end here. The kingdom renews its affirmation of its position, calling for the unity, security, stability, and preservation of Sudan's legitimate institutions and its rejection of foreign interference, as well as the continued actions by some parties in bringing in illicit weapons, mercenaries, and foreign fighters, aka the UAE. All of these countries are calling out the UAE vaguely without saying it, but they're saying it directly as you can say it at least. Despite these parties' claims of supporting a political solution, such behavior is considered a primary factor in prolonging the conflict and increasing the suffering of the brotherly Sudanese people. 2 months back, Mohammed bin Salman, who probably brokered this, actually went to President Trump when he met with him. Remember when that journalist called him out for chopping up the reporter? In that same
Huh.
meeting or that same
Yeah,
day,
Khashoggi?
yeah, Khashoggi,
Bro,
he
that
actually
was crazy, bro.
brought up to Trump, hey, we got to help out Sudan. So it seems that maybe he's having some Western support on this. Like I said, the United States has become more vocal about it. The UN has been vocal about it,
Mhm.
but this is just more proof. The whole Algeria situation and them arming themselves up, disassociating from UAE, moving closer to Saudi Arabia, and then Saudi Arabia being this vocal about the issue in Sudan tells me that all of these countries are slowly but surely trying to undermine the UAE and align with Saudi Arabia. Like I said, the Shadow Alliance is kind of taking suit. And I'm kind of venerated in what I said and vindicated because this just happened yesterday. So that's kind of a breakdown of what's going on in Algeria right now. But a lot of these countries are looking to Russia, which is not the best thing and the best news for us. It would be nice if they seized or bought our military assets, but again, they can't do that for obvious reasons. But go ahead. What were you going to say about
No, no, no,
Khashoggi?
no, no. I'm just listening. I think this is great for the audience to like learn about a lot of the Middle Eastern dynamics of what the fuck is really going on over there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
So that's it
Because
in a nutshell.
yeah.
Also, I forgot to mention, Morocco is arming themselves up with jets as well. And it seems that Morocco is kind of growing in tension with Algeria, although it's a little bit vague right now. I haven't been able to really get good evidence for that, which is why I'm not speaking on it. It's all speculative. But some people were suspecting that as well, that they're trying to match their military capability. But I don't know if there's a double undertone because of Morocco's alliance with the United States and Israel that's kind of shifting Algeria in the other direction to side up with the Russian regime. So that's another thing to note as well. But go ahead.
No, no, that's great analysis, man. And I'm glad that people are able to kind of like, you know, because here's the thing. A lot of people don't do deep dives on the Middle East and like understand all the dynamics of